Hello and welcome to the History Quiz, March 2024, with me, Joshua Daniels. So, for those of you who have never played before, this is a monthly quiz I'm doing throughout the year of 2024, released once a month. And I aim to make them as accessible as possible, so if you're a history nerd, or if you're a full-blown historian, or even if you're someone who just wants to play a little quiz with your friends and family, this quiz will be for you. I'm trying to make it as well as accessible for people from different backgrounds, as it will cover different periods, different genres of history, and different geographical areas as well. Probably take about 20 minutes. So the rules, really simple, really straightforward. Number one, there's no conferring. You can play as teams or on your own, but no discussion or cheating between players, so you can't tell each other answers, give each other hints or copy from them. And also there's really no pausing in order to try and get more time on the answers, etc., or try and distract another team or player. Number two, no using search engines or internets to find out the answers, so you have to do it all through yourself, and it's one answer per question, 1 point per correct answer. And number four, there are 5 categories, 30 questions, 15 seconds to answer each one. You do not need to answer all the questions, but will not get a point for questions left unanswered. So, let's jump straight into the first category. So the first category is famous faces. So this category is really straightforward. I will show you 10 pictures, so there'll be 10 questions, potential 10 points, and each of them will be a picture of a famous historical figure. All you have to do is write down which figure you think it is that's being shown. So without further ado, let's march swiftly on into the first category. And the first question, number one, whose face is this? And number two, whose face is this? And number three, whose face is this? And number four, whose face is this? And number five, whose face is this? Number six, whose face is this? And number seven, whose face is this? And number five, whose face is, and number eight, whose face is this? And the penultimate face in our first category, number 9, whose face is this? And the final face in our first category, famous faces, number 10, whose face is this? And that marks the end of the first category, famous faces. So we'll be moving on to the second category now. And the second category is events and dates. So if you've never played this before, this one's a little bit different to the rest of the categories. What's going to happen is I'm going to show you 5 events on the left-hand side of the screen, and there will be 5 dates on the right-hand side of the screen. The events will be labelled 1 to 5, and the dates will be labelled A to E. All you have to do is match up the event to its correct date. Now you can either do that by writing down 1 and then putting the corresponding letter, or you could write down the event and the date, whichever one is alright, whichever one works for you. It's also a bit different as you will just have a minute to complete it after I finished reading out the events and the dates. So without further ado, if we're all ready, let's move into the second category, events and dates. Events and dates. The events. Number 1, fall of the Soviet Union. Event number 2, the Doomsday Book is completed. Number 3, the start of the Anglo-Saxon period of Britain. Number 4, the Mayflower sails from Plymouth, UK to America. And number 5, the First Opium War. The dates: A, 1991, B, 410, C, 1839, D, 1086, and E, 1620. Your time starts now. You have a minute. Halfway through. Ten seconds left. And that marks the end of our second category, events and dates. Moving on to the third category now. The third category is true or false. So really straightforward as you can guess, but if you've never played before, here's how it goes. I will show you 5 historical facts, 5 historical statements, and you have to write whether you think they are true or false. You get 1 point for writing the correct answer, no points if you write the wrong answer. So there'll be 15 seconds per question for you to answer. You only have to write down the words true or false, or T or F, whichever one you think. And it will be then we'll move on to the fourth category, the penultimate one after that. So without further ado, let's move into the third category, true or false, with our first question. Number 1. The metal iron gets its name from the amalgamation of the words eye and earn, as it was first smelted in eye-shaped furnaces. True or false? Number 2. Golf was played on the moon in 1971. True or false? Question number 3. A horse, my kingdom for a horse, is said by William the Conqueror in the Shakespeare play. True or false? Penultimate question of this category. Number 4. Tuberculosis was also called captain of all these men of death. True or false? And the final question in this category, number 5. Anne Frank had a sister named Margot Frank who died of typhus just a few days before Anne did. True or false? And that marks the end of the true or false category. On to our fourth and penultimate category. Which came first? Really straightforward. I will present 2 historical events and you have to write down which event you think came before the other. 15 seconds per question, 1 point per correct answer, 5 questions. And if we're ready, let's move into the fourth and penultimate category. Which came first? Number 1. Our first question, which came first, the bombing of Hiroshima or the bombing of Nagasaki? Number 2, which came first, Operation Rolling Thunder or Operation Barbarossa? Number 3, which came first, the Paleolithic period or the Neolithic period? Moving on to the penultimate question in this category. Number 4, which came first, the Tower Bridge or the Eiffel Tower? And the final question in this penultimate category. Number 5, which came first, the last Dodo flight or the last Concorde flight? And that marks the end of our penultimate category, which came first. Moving on to our fifth and final category, which is general history knowledge. Really simple, really straightforward, as you might be able to guess. There will be 5 questions based around general history knowledge, no gimmicks, no tricks, etc. And the rules are very plain and easy. You just have to write down the correct answer to get a point for each of the questions. So, without further ado, let's move on to our final and 5th category, general history knowledge, our final 5 questions. General history knowledge. Number 1. What did Alexander Graham Bell invent in 1876? Number 2. Geraldine Jerry Mock was the first woman to do what? Question number 3. Which country won the first ever FIFA World Cup? Penultimate question, question number 4. Who was the first president of the USA? And moving on to the 5th and final question of our 5th and final category. Number 5. Joseph Stalin died in which year? And with that, that marks the end of our March 2024 quiz. I hope you've enjoyed. We'll now, of course, move on to the answers. Give you a bit of a second, bit of a breather. We're going to be going back to the first category. How we usually do the answers is I will just go through and say number 1 is this one, number 2 is this one. Make it really easy for you. So if we're ready, we will go all the way back to Famous Faces, the first 10 questions, and we will have a look to see how many people have got. Number 1 was Eleanor Roosevelt. Number 2 was Mary Seacole. Number 3 was Mansa Musa. Number 4 was Benito Mussolini. Number 5 was Napoleon Bonaparte. I will accept Napoleon. I'll also accept Mussolini for number 4. Number 6 was Oscar Wilde. Number 7 was Emmeline Pankhurst. Number 8 was Boudicca or Boudicca. Number 9 was Joan of Arc. And number 10 was Rasputin. Moving on to category number 2, which was events and dates. So, number 1, fall of the Soviet Union, goes to A, 1991. So 1 is A, 1991. Number 2, Doomsday Book completed, goes to D, 1086. So 2 is D, 1086. Number 3, start of the Anglo-Saxon period of Britain, goes to B, 410. So 3 is B, 410. Number 4, the Mayflower sails from Plymouth, UK to America. That goes to E, 1620. So 4 is E, 1620. And number 5, the First Opium War, goes to C, 1839. So 5 is C, 1839. Tally up how many you've got as we move into the third category answers, which was the true or false questions. Number 1, true or false? The metal iron gets its name from the amalgamation of the words eye and urn, as it was first smelted in eye-shaped furnaces. Number 1 is false. Perhaps the word could have meant holy metal, as it was used in crusades' swords, but it doesn't come from the eye or urn amalgamation. Number 2, golf was played on the moon in 1971. That's true. Apparently the astronaut missed his first swing. Number 3, a horse, my kingdom for a horse, is said by William the Conqueror in the Shakespeare play. That is false. It was by Richard III, so 3 is false. Number 4, tuberculosis, also TB, was also called captain of all these men of death. That is true, and it was after the 1680 English writer John Bunyan coined it. It was also one of, if not the deadliest disease in human history. And number 5, Anne Frank had a sister named Margot Frank who died of typhus just a few days before Anne did. That is true. Very tragic, very sad story, of course. And that marks the end of category number 3, true or false. We're now moving on to category number 4, which came first. So, which came first? Number 1, the bombing of Hiroshima or the bombing of Nagasaki? That was the bombing of Hiroshima. Hiroshima was the 6th of August and Nagasaki was the 9th of August. Number 2, Operation Rolling Thunder or Operation Barbarossa. It was Operation Barbarossa. Operation Barbarossa was 1941, Rolling Thunder was 1965. Number 3, the Paleolithic period or the Neolithic period. It was the Paleolithic period. Number 4, the Tower Bridge or Eiffel Tower. It is Eiffel Tower. It was 1889 for Eiffel and 1894 for Tower Bridge, so not much difference, but Eiffel Tower just came first. And number 5, the last Dodo flight or the last Concorde flight, and it was the Dodo by several centuries. That is the end of category number 4, which came first. Moving on to the 5th and final category, General History Knowledge. So General History Knowledge, category number 5. Number 1, what did Alexander Graham Bell invent in 1876? Number 1 is the telephone. Number 2, Geraldine Jerry Mock was the first woman to do what? She was the first woman to fly solo around the world. Number 3, which country won the first ever FIFA World Cup? That is Uruguay, so number 3 is Uruguay. Number 4, who was the first president of the USA? That was George Washington. And so 4 is George Washington. And number 5, Joseph Stalin died in which year? He died in 1953. So 5 is 1953. So that marks the end of the history quiz with me, Joshua Daniels, for March 2024. Thank you very much for playing. Let me know in the comments how you did. And I hope you enjoyed. Maybe share this with some of your friends and family and play it with someone else. Test their history knowledge as well. And I hope to see you all in April.